There are so many people making eye-catching, what we call thumb scroll stopping content on every social media platform that as a business owner, it pays dividends to get your face, your voice, your body language in front of your potential customers.
I'm Ken Newhouse. To me, building a profitable business isn't only about generating leads and driving sales. It's about who we are and what we're made of. I succeed in business by finding the most effective methods to persuade, inspire, and ignite the imagination of others, and find the most effective methods to persuade, inspire, and ignite the imagination of others to succeed in business. I am the new breed of entrepreneur. Join us on the quest as we search for the newest and most effective methods you can use to get clients now. It seems like yesterday, but it was 8 years ago that Lee transitioned from a career in pharmaceutical sales to pursue a career in a field she was passionate about, social media marketing. Lee had zero experience in marketing and only knew about social media from personal use, but her ultimate goal was to have her own social media marketing company. As a former slalom skier who won the U.S. Junior Nationals, Lee faced every challenge like a double black diamond on the back bowls at Vail Mountain, fearlessly. Her first job in social media marketing was a volunteer position at the Center for the Deaf and Hearing Impaired. She knew that if she wanted to get a job at a reputable company doing social media marketing, she would need experience. So she invested 6 months of her time doing the work without pay. Lee was thrilled for the opportunity. Firstly, because she was helping a great cause, and secondly, because she got to learn social media marketing on the job, and the nonprofit paid for her education. Over the following 7.5 years, Lee worked for various companies as a social media marketer. And during that time, she developed a special affinity and love for marketing products on Amazon, Wayfair, Facebook, and Instagram. 8 months ago, Lee got one step closer to the dream of starting her own social media marketing company. She was ready to start her journey as a solopreneur, so she made the leap and left the corporate world to start her own business. Lee had been a believer in hard work her entire life, a trait her parents and ski coaches instilled in her before the age of 10. By the time she was 13 years old, she was the best skier on Mammoth High School girls' varsity team. She worked incredibly hard to get there and hated the entitlement mindset that so many of the girls on the team had. She was the first one on the mountain each day at practice and always the last one to leave. Her hard work eventually paid off. At the age of 15, she won the U.S. Junior Nationals, defeating second-place finisher Peekaboo Street by over 2 seconds. As she thought about her future as an entrepreneur, her confidence soared. She had an insane work ethic, and with 7+ years working in the trenches of social media marketing, the pieces were falling into place. Life couldn't have been better. Hey everybody, Ken Newhouse here, and I'm going to welcome you to this episode of the Get Clients Now podcast. It's August 2020, and the COVID-19 pandemic has forced nearly all businesses to move towards doing business and sales meetings virtually. And while the pandemic will eventually come to an end, the data suggests that the business world will look very, very different after COVID-19. As a result of so many businesses being forced to do business virtually, especially sales presentations with prospects and existing clients, I wanted to provide a framework and concise recommendations on how to optimize virtual sales performance during COVID-19. Because when it comes to doing sales presentations with prospective clients, putting your best foot forward so you can outshine the competition is of critical importance to your success. On today's episode, I'll be talking with David Power about how you can produce the best sounding audio and the highest quality video during your virtual sales presentations and meetings. Today's interview was originally going to focus on these same elements as they relate to podcasting and live stream video. But with so many business owners, prospective and existing clients and employees being forced to work from home, and because the framework David is going to cover with you today can help you look like a real professional during your virtual meetings with prospective clients, I reframed the entire interview. During today's interview, David's going to reveal several strategies and tips you can use to quickly and easily improve the quality of your virtual presentations. If you want to get the biggest benefit from today's interview, you'll want to do this. When David says the word podcast or live stream, I want you to interchange that with the word virtual meeting from home. If you're a podcaster or a live streamer looking for strategies and techniques to make your show sound and look way more professional, I've got fabulous news for you. You're absolutely going to love the show because David totally knocked it out of the park for you today. With me today, I've got Mr. David Power, and David is the author of two really incredible books. One is on technical side of podcasting, the audio portion of recording and all that's involved with that, as well as we're going to talk about some video today. He's got a book on video as well. But what I want to do, David, if you don't mind, I want to actually cover a few of the questions that I asked my guests. I mean, if you could take a minute or two, give us your backstory, bring us up to speed with how you got to where you are now. Obviously, you're doing a lot of stuff, but you got two awesome books on audio technology and video technology for podcasters and people shooting and using a lot of video in their business. So if you could take us up to speed, how'd you get to where you are now doing what you're doing?
So as far as audio recording goes, my journey began when I was probably 9 or 10 years old. And my dad brought home a Philips cassette recorder. And it was a big clunky thing with a handle and a shoulder strap and a handheld microphone. So it was kind of a reporter style recorder. And we had planned a road trip that summer. And my dad had some record albums, some vinyl LPs that I wanted to take with us to listen to in the car on this road trip. And of course, there was no way to take LPs and play them in the car. So I decided what I'm going to do is set up this microphone handheld in front of the floor model stereo and record both sides of the vinyl LPs. There were things like Neil Diamond and Roger Whittaker, whom I was a fan of as a 10-year-old boy. You know, you end up being fans of whatever your parents are fans of at that age. And it took many, many tries to get it right. The problems I ran into were compounded by the fact that I had 3 younger brothers running around, and trying to get them to stay out of a room or be silent for any period of time was always a challenge. So that's where my journey began, in pursuit of the perfect recording, the perfect handheld silent recording. And that was many years ago at this point. And I've always been interested in technology and audio and video things. When I was a teenager, I harassed my dad so much that he finally brought home a Commodore VIC-20 computer. And that's how I learned to program. That led to me going to engineering school and getting a degree in electrical engineering. So, I've always been a geek, a tech head. And as technology became more affordable and we can afford to have, the equivalent of $1 million type studios in our homes and bedrooms now, it's just been a real boon to me and to everyone else who has similar pursuits and interests.
Was there an individual? I mean, you mentioned the incident with your dad bringing home that recorder, but David, was there an incident or an individual, maybe even a book that really set you on this path other than what you just told me? Or was that pretty much what really anchored this home for you and gave you the love for what you're doing right now?
It's a great question. And it's only in the past couple of weeks since you and I became acquainted that I thought about this and realized that both of my grandfathers on both my mom and dad's side were essentially geeks. Now, they were geeks in an era where technology was very, very Spartan. One of my grandfathers, my mom's dad, was a telegraph operator. So he was on, the front lines during the war as a Morse code telegraph operator. And he ended up becoming a senior person in the Western Union, managing a cable office. And he was, a geek of the 20th century. So I had a lot in common with him growing up. And, we would always kind of steal away to his study and he'd show me cool things that he used years ago and show me old books from, the 1800s that he had, some of which I inherited when he passed. We really kind of bonded over techie stuff even before I knew it was techie stuff. So that was my one grandfather. My dad's dad, was a machinist. And both my grandfathers grew up in a time where post-secondary education for them wasn't a thing. They learned their craft by studying under a master and, doing apprenticeship, journeyman, informal training. So he was a machinist and by all accounts was a very talented one. He could build very intricate pieces and full machines using nothing more than a pencil and a ruler. So, he had that kind of mind as well.
Let me ask you this. This is another question that I like to ask guests from time to time. David, what's something about you that people in the marketplace don't know, but you'd like them to know?
That's a great question. This is something when I worked in the corporate world, it was something I looked for in potential new hires. But I will say this about myself, that I am an expert problem solver. I'd say that's the one thing, if I were to describe my superpower, it's the ability to solve complex problems.
That definitely comes in handy in the business setting. That certainly will come in handy, I think, even right now. And that leads me to my next question. With respect to COVID-19, what's the biggest challenge that you've noticed or you've had to deal with in your business as it relates to COVID-19?
I have been so lucky that during this period, my business has not suffered in terms of productivity or income or demand. I know there are a lot of people who are suffering right now, and I empathize with them. I truly and honestly do. I have been super blessed and lucky that has not happened to me. The challenges I have faced, and I'm going to preface this by acknowledging their luxury problems. I've got food, I've got shelter, I've got toilet paper. I don't have to worry about the very bottom rung of Maslow's hierarchy. So I consider myself lucky, and I appreciate that every day.
Lee wanted to take her marketing skills to the highest level possible, so in January of 2020, she joined my Inner Circle coaching program. Learning how to write powerful, story-based, emotionally compelling copy was the skill set she needed to put her business head and shoulders above the competition. Suffice it to say that we were delighted to have her as a student. Her work ethic was incredible. Some might even say it was borderline obsessed. But all successful people understand the value of hard work, and Lee was no exception. In February 2020, Lee used her sales experience and the new copywriting skills we taught her to land her first client. The client's company sold industrial-strength children's furniture, toys, carpets, and more for daycare centers and schools. The day Lee inked the deal with the client, my phone literally exploded with text messages. Later that afternoon, I had a 15-minute window, so I called her. Her excitement radiated through the phone, and I could literally feel the warmth of that big smile of hers. Lee had her first new client, but everybody knows that getting a huge client when you're just starting out doesn't happen very often. But Lee was ready for the challenge. She began meeting with her client immediately, and over the next several weeks, the marketing campaigns she created began running on social media. This niche was entirely new to her, but the initial results were better than expected, and her client was happy. The entrepreneurial life was off to a fabulous start, and then suddenly, without warning, everything seemingly started to fall apart. The first wave of COVID-19 shutdowns went into effect, and Lee now faced a dilemma that she didn't know how to handle. Lee had never had to work virtually with a client or employer. She didn't know the first thing about audio and video equipment or how to set up her office, so that she both looked and sounded professional during virtual meetings. For the first time in years, Lee felt a sense of fear and overwhelm. And whether her feelings were justified or not, she feared that not being prepared for virtual meetings might cost her this client. What I want to do now, if we could, is I want to transition over into the main topic of the show today. One of the main topics, which is the audio portion of having a podcast and just recording. What are the 2 or 3 biggest reasons that you see that people fail when it comes to the audio portion as it relates to audio, the audio of podcasting? What do you think are the 2 to 3 biggest reasons people fail at podcasting? And, if your audio sucks, even if your content is good, people will not listen for very long. They just will not do it. There's too many other choices available to them.
Another great question, Ken. Your content is always the most important thing. You have to have good content. You have to have a point of view and a voice that you're willing to share. I don't mean your physical voice, but your point of view on life and your topic. Those things are the most critical aspects. But when it comes to podcasting, in my experience, several years ago and continuing today, the most common questions I'll see and receive personally rarely have anything to do with the content. They are, what microphone do I need? how do I edit my audio to sound like, for instance, NPR? And I mean, some of those questions, things like, what microphone do I use? Is like asking Stephen King what pencil he uses to write his novels. It's completely irrelevant, but you're absolutely right that that quality does matter. At a certain level, quality does matter. There have been people who have started successful shows with two people sitting around a mobile phone and talking into the built-in microphone. So you can get by, but at a certain level, your competition has far better audio quality than you have. So you need to step up your game. And I've heard, and I'm gathering you and most of our listeners have heard as well, podcasts with gross errors. For instance, episodes where one voice is so much louder than the other that you're constantly riding your volume control. So there are some very basic things you need to pay attention to. And one of the most important in terms of audio quality, and this is actually the very first chapter in my book, is the room in which you record. And people don't expect that. Most people don't expect that. And they're quite disappointed when it's the first thing they're confronted with.
Yeah, they want it to be a magical microphone. Somehow, if I just buy that magical microphone, it's going to solve all my problems. But talk about that for just a minute, because, I said that's one of those things that I learned. I learned that kind of the hard way, upgraded my mic, and hey, I'm still getting echoes and all kinds of bizarre stuff. But talk about that. Run with that one.
Most of us, I include myself in this, don't have dedicated rooms. Now, I personally now have a dedicated room, but most people who want to start a podcast don't have a dedicated room they can treat properly. Now, you're getting a small section of my room. You can see there's a bass trap behind me in red, and then other panels, black panels off to the sides. In fact, the entire room is covered somewhere close to 50% with professional acoustic tiles. These are not the foam egg crate kind you find on Amazon for $2 a piece. These are custom built, high density fiberglass stretched over wooden frames with fabric. They're expensive, and I don't recommend anyone starting a podcast go out and spend $1,000 on acoustic panels. But my point is, you need to choose a room, and every room sounds a little different. You can get a good idea whether a room is good or not by walking into it, clapping your hands, and just listening. If you can hear that fraction of a second where that hand clap bounces around the room 20 times and trails off, that's not a great room. There are things you can do to improve a bad room, but you're much better off starting with a room that sounds good in the first place. So high ceilings tend to be bad because you just get sound that bounces up and down, which is why I have acoustic tiles hanging from the ceiling.
It was during a group coaching meeting that Lee told us, I have to invest in quality audio and video hardware. I need to get my office set up to hold virtual meetings, and I need to act fast. I've got to find someone who can help me create a virtual studio so that I'm ready for my first client meeting. The client had no idea that they were Lee's first, but like any client who invested this much money, certainly they would expect her to look and sound professional in virtual meetings. Lee knew that if she tried to use the camera and built-in microphone on her MacBook Pro during the virtual meetings, there was a good chance that she'd lose them. You see, not everyone at her client's company was on board with hiring her, and those who had opposed hiring her were the type of people who would be actively looking for reasons. In fact, any reason they could use to get rid of her and hire the people they wanted to hire. Lee had to get set up and get this right and do it fast.
Look for a room, find a room in your home or in your office or in any building that's available to you that sounds good when you're just having a regular conversation. Any acoustical imperfections in a room get multiplied by a factor of 10 when you record audio with a microphone. So find that good room. Sometimes you'll be limited in the amount of treatment you can do or provide to the room, but always start with a good sounding room or the best sounding room you have available.
You know, something you mentioned in the book that I've kind of chuckled at, and it was only because of a lack of time, the audio quality. I recorded a whole bunch of shows in my car because I was taking my youngest daughter, Hannah, to soccer practice like 5 days a week. But I was forced to record in my car. The problem was, and this was early on in my show, I didn't record through a decent microphone. In fact, I used that little guy right there. So talk about, and my mistake was I tried to plug in like a lavalier mic, which made it worse. So when I just recorded through this, the sound quality was better. Wasn't bad, but you mentioned that a car is actually, if push comes to shove, a car actually gives you better sound if you record in a car. It's not the best place to record, but if you really don't have anywhere else and you're looking for decent sound, just take about a minute or so and tell us why a car works so well to do your recording and not while this, the air conditioner's blasting or music playing on your stereo, things like that. Why is that such a good place to record?
Yeah, it's. I'm glad you added that. It's important that A, you're not driving while you're recording, and you're not on a freeway or close to any loud sound noises. It's better if you're parked quietly, even at night, somewhere where there's not a lot of traffic. If you think about the physical characteristics of a room that make it sound bad, those things are hard surfaces, parallel walls, no kind of dampening materials or furniture. The emptier a room is, the worse it sounds. If you then think about the interior of a car, well, you've got a lot of upholstery on seats, and even things like dashboards and doors. They're not super hard. They're usually a softer material, and that's done for safety reasons. But they're softer, and they're quite often not perfectly smooth either. They're a little grainy. So that all of those characteristics tend to absorb sound, break it down, and deflect it. Even if you look at the shape of a car, the windows are not perfectly parallel to one another. They're slanted slightly. The windshield in the front and the rear they're curved. They have they're angled up and down. So all of the characteristics that make a bad room sound bad are generally absent in the interior of a car. So it ends up sounding typically a lot better than you'll get a better recording in a car, in the interior of a car, than you will in a terrible room in your home.
Okay, so let's do this. It's a questioning process I use from time to time with guests, and it's like a rapid fire bullet session. What I'm going to do is I'm going to read a topic. It might be 1 or 2 words, might be 3 words. And then I want you to take a minute or less, because I got a lot of questions today, a minute or less to answer whatever comes to mind on this. Just give me your best response on this. Okay, the first one I want to talk about is microphones.
Microphones. Best advice I can give is choose a dynamic microphone. There are 2 basic types. There's a dynamic microphone, which doesn't require a power supply. It's often called phantom power, and a condenser microphone, which does require phantom power. The dynamic microphone, you'll need a good, high-quality preamplifier of some sort, and some USB mics have built-in preamplifiers, so that shouldn't be a problem. But the problem with condenser microphones is that in a bad room, or when there's noise competing for your voices, it sounds terrible. Condenser microphones can be great in studio environments and in properly treated rooms. In a bad room or a noisy room or noisy environment, they can sound terrible. If you're a new podcaster, stick with a dynamic microphone. Make sure you look for that when you're shopping. Okay.
Windscreen, I have to assume this is the same thing. Windscreen/pop filters.
Absolutely, 100% always have one. The reason being, when you put your dynamic mic or any mic close to your mouth, and you get a better result the closer you are to your microphone. Right now, the microphone I'm using is probably 6-7 inches away. If I were doing a voiceover of some sort, if I were doing a non-video podcast, I would probably be a lot closer. The pop screen, and Ken, I notice you have one in front of your microphone, the pop filter. It reduces what are known as plosives, and those are the loud P sounds you'll hear when somebody is too close to the microphone, and you don't have to speak at any kind of extra volume. Speaking at a normal volume, our Ps tend to create bursts of air that land on a microphone's diaphragm and sound terrible and distracting and unprofessional. So always use a pop filter whenever possible.
Okay, next question. Recording software. I use a backup, so I record primarily through Audition, Adobe Audition, which I know a lot of people don't use because it's complex and it's expensive. But I also back up with Audacity. So take about 90 seconds because I gave you a little bit longer there. So you can talk a little bit longer on that one.
Yeah, so recording software, there are literally and I'm not exaggerating, dozens, if not hundreds of options for recording audio. If you're brand new and you're starting out, you might want to start with something free. There are great podcasts that have been recorded solely on GarageBand if you're a Mac user. And I think that comes pre-installed on pretty much every Mac. If not, you can download it for free. If you happen to be on another system, Audacity, as Ken just mentioned, is a great choice. It's 100% free. It's available for Windows, Mac, and Linux, I believe, if you happen to be a Linux user. And the only issue with Audacity is that it takes there's a little bit of a learning curve. But, to find your inputs and stage your gain properly and adequately. But once you get rolling, it costs you $0 and it can really get you up and running pretty quickly. If you have a little more money, you might want to look at something, or a little more budget, you might want to look at something like Reaper. And Reaper will be admittedly overkill for a simple podcast, but it gives you plenty of room to grow. It's available right now for, I think, $60. A license, a non-commercial license, will cost you $60. And it will give you everything you need to grow into the future pretty much infinitely. So those would be my top picks: GarageBand, Audacity, if you're not on a Mac or Mac OS, and then Reaper, which I think is available for both platforms, if memory serves, for just a little bit more money. But those would be my three top picks.
Let's move to the next one. Must-have accessories.
Must-have accessories. You definitely want a microphone stand. You can have a desk stand is what I'm using right here on this microphone. But the overarching point here is that you do not want to hold a microphone in your hand for an entire podcast recording.
As a member in my coaching group and subscriber to my podcast, I was the first person Lee approached for help. And while I don't actively coach clients and members on audio and video technology and techniques, I was delighted to help. After making my suggestions, Lee invested in a Shure SM7B microphone and Logitech C930E webcam. The microphone setup ran just over $800, and the webcam about $125. After Lee got her new microphone and camera setup, I agreed to do a virtual meeting, quote-unquote, test with her to make sure that she had everything just right and ready to go for her first meeting.
Not only will your arm and hand get tired if you're on for an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, but every time you move your hand, even slightly, the microphone will pick it up. It will end up on your recording. So absolutely invest in a stand. You can get a small desktop stand for $20. You can get a full-on boom arm stand, a floor model, for a little bit more. So it's absolutely worth it and a must-have.
What about a shock mount?
Shock mount's a good idea because it will isolate your recording, your microphone, from any kind of thumps, bumps, or anything else that's going on. Even air conditioning hum can induce rumble in your microphone if it's loud enough. So it's worthwhile. It's in my top 5. No, probably not my top 3, but definitely my top 5. What else? You want to wear headphones when you're recording. Now, you might be looking at this and going, well, David, why aren't you wearing headphones? Reality is I'm wearing very special in-ear monitors. So I am wearing headphones. They're hidden. And I'm only doing that because because this is on video, and I think I wanted to look attractive. But if for every other podcast recording or voiceover style recording I'm wearing huge cans on my head.
And why do we want to use headphones?
So there's a concept that we refer to in the industry as microphone technique. And it's a lot of syllables to describe the fact that you want to ensure you're speaking into your microphone. And dynamic microphones are usually fairly directional, which means that they pick up sounds that are right in front of them, but not so much when they're off to the side. And that's one of the beauties and one of the reasons, perhaps the main reason I recommend them for new podcasters in not so great environments. Your microphone technique when you're recording a podcast or any recording is key. What I mean is, if I turn my head to my left and continue talking, you'll see how my voice drops off a lot. Same if I go to the right, up or down. When you're hearing your own voice through headphones, you are 100% aware of when you're speaking into the microphone and when you've wandered off to the left or right. So when you're listening to yourself, you're hearing your own microphone technique. You're hearing the microphone technique of all the other speakers in the room. And on top of that, as a producer, as someone who produces podcasts, I end up being the director as well. And when someone isn't paying attention, I get to say, hey, could you just, I'll do a sidebar and go, could you just make sure you're a little closer to the mic or you're speaking directly into it? So monitoring your audio while recording, 100% not optional. Absolutely do it.
Sweet. All right. So let's do this because of the sake of time. I also want to talk about video. So I did an interview within the last couple of weeks with someone who does live streaming. I've been considering it. I think I'm going to do it, but it's completely different than video on demand. And we'll dive into maybe live streaming if you're comfortable with that. If not, I don't really know at this point where you stand on live streaming versus video on demand. Why is it important for a business owner in 2020 to consider utilizing and incorporating video into their business, whether it's, hey, I got a podcast and I'm shooting video as well, or I don't have a podcast, but I'm making VSLs, like video sales letters, webinars, maybe I'm vlogging, video blogging, so on and so forth. Why is video so critically important in the era in which we live today for a business?
Great question. And the answer is going to be very simple. It's that there are so many people making eye-catching, what we call thumb scroll stopping content on every social media platform that as a business owner, it pays dividends to get your face, your voice, your body language in front of your potential customers.
To my surprise and to her horror, the lighting in Lee's office was so bad that you couldn't see her face clearly on the video, and the bright window behind her made it worse, even with the blinds closed. Additionally, the high ceilings in her office created a horrific echo on the audio. In short, Lee was not ready for the first virtual meeting with her client, a meeting that was scheduled for the following Monday. She had 5 days to get these problems fixed, or she was facing potential disaster. The Lee I had come to know, the person always beaming with confidence, was beginning to crack from the pressure. The COVID shutdown and the thought of losing her first big client was almost too much to handle. For the first time in my relationship with her, I began to hear doubt and uncertainty in her voice.
You simply cannot accomplish those same things on audio only, and you definitely get nowhere close with only text. Video is the only medium where you can, acknowledging it's virtual, you're virtually looking into your customer's eyes. They are looking at your face. I mean, as humans, this is one of the most basic, primal ways we learned whether or not the person we're talking to is trustworthy. We get to look into their eyes. We hear their tone of voice. We get to see their body language, how they use their hands, how they gesticulate. All of those things are super important. Now, this doesn't apply to every business, but small business owners whose personality is front and foremost in their business dealings with their customers, it pays dividends to get all of your humanness in front of them in the form of video. And today it can be done so easily and so cheaply with just a little instruction and a little coaching along the way.
Yeah, that's been one of my biggest challenges. And I told you before we started, I need to see someone's face when I'm talking to them. I think it helps me communicate better. It helps me understand them better. Video is growing. We know that. It's becoming the standard, or it is the standard now. But the growth of people who are involved or participate in live streaming is growing at a 400% rate faster than people who watch long form video on demand. And it's growing, and I saw this on Statista in the last couple of weeks, and it's growing almost 1,200% over short form video. Compare that with video on demand. Where do you stand on those two?
Yeah, it's interesting. And as our social media platforms evolve, we're seeing changes in the way people produce content and consume content. And I think this is what we're seeing right now. I've been involved with a friend who owns a music venue in my neighborhood and helped him set up a 3-camera live streaming system. So he's, even throughout the COVID period, he's been able to have performers in without an audience and live stream their performances. It can create magic, really, when it's done well. And I'm going to have to guess on this because I'm not a psychologist and I haven't studied this in any kind of real detail, but I believe there's something special about knowing the stream you're watching is happening in real time and that it's not been scripted, even though they can be scripted. That it's not heavily scripted. It's not been edited. People are not kind of like throwing all kinds of extra processing and pulling the humanness out of it. I think that's the key. I think that we as humans, we appreciate the real-time interactivity and knowing something has been produced and made and recorded maybe, who knows, a day ago, 100 days ago. That kind of takes some of the humanness and specialness out of it. That's what I think is going on.
From what I've read, and by no means am I an expert on live streaming, not even close, but you have engagement. A lot of the live streams, you can, like Facebook Live, you can have people that ask questions in the chat, they can respond. You have the immediacy of the whole thing. There's just a lot more to it. And so that's one of the things that's really piqued my interest. But let's do this if you're ready. I want to jump back into the rapid fire bullet questions again, but this time for video. First one is cameras.
Cameras are expensive. A good, high quality camera is expensive.
After investing a couple of hours in research, Lee found a lighting setup that would fix the issues on the live stream videos, but she was confused and unsure about which sound dampening products to use to get rid of the echo. In a somewhat frantic phone call to me, Lee said that she was running out of time and had to make a decision. That's when I recommended that she contact David Power, but Lee didn't want to wait. Never one to shy away from hard work or a challenge, she went all in and invested in 10 sound dampening panels. 10 panels for a room this size was certainly overkill, but just like she did with competitive skiing, Lee faced every challenge with resolute determination and a willingness to make a decision and take immediate action. The sound dampeners arrived from Amazon approximately 14 hours before her virtual meeting with the client. Lee and her husband worked well into the night hanging them, and by 11:30 p.m. they had finished. After picking up the boxes and cleaning up her mess, it was now Monday morning, 12:15 a.m., and Lee not only didn't have time to test how her new audio would sound, she didn't have the energy. She was exhausted.
You don't need a $1,000 camera to get started in either video production or live streaming. Buy what you can afford. Buy a good quality camera, something where you have full control over things like the exposure, the aperture, the shutter speed, the frame rate, even the bit rate at which things are recorded. I'm using a Logitech C920. Right now, it's a super expensive camera. 3 months ago, it was a $50 camera.
Why has the price gone up?
So prices have gone up because everyone is now working at home, and a lot of companies are expensing them. They're saying, listen, we need you to work from home and join Zoom calls 4 times a day. So go out and expense a camera. And I think that the demand has risen where the supply has probably dropped off, given factory closings and whatnot in China. So so prices have gone through the roof if you try and shop for one of these cameras right now. But as you can see, it's not terrible. You can get a decent picture. You can do your live streaming. You can even, in a pinch, record videos with a camera like this. So, this kind of camera, which, on a good day you can find for $50, $60, is a great place to start. If you have more budget, by all means, go after it. But be aware that there's a lot more learning involved to using a more expensive, more elaborate camera.
Okay. Audio recorders, and I know we just talked about that, but is there a difference in the audio recording when you're using video? As an example, I'm using a Logitech. I think I paid like $120 for this when I bought it, but there's no way I would use the audio from that camera. What are your thoughts on, as it relates to video, the audio portion of that?
The camera itself, the Logitech cameras, generally almost always have microphones built in. They're small little pinhole microphones, and they tend to be 3 feet away from your face. The audio they will create for you, they'll pick up and record for you. In my opinion, not even close to acceptable. So that means using an external microphone and then having a way, and that can be either a desktop microphone like the one we're looking at right here, or a lapel or lavalier microphone. Either way, you need to get that audio into a secondary device. And you can, if you happen to be in front of a computer, great. You can get a USB version, plug it into your computer, and then have a separate application recording audio at the same time. I personally, and I think you may do this as well, can use an external audio recorder. And I'm using right now a Sound Devices MixPre 6. Again, that's a very expensive recorder. I don't recommend someone starting out go out and make that kind of expenditure. But you can find some of the Zoom models, not Zoom, the video conferencing system, but Zoom, like I think the H1N, I think it's called, and not the bird flu virus. But so yes, a small Zoom recorder, plug your lavalier into it. The audio and video game will jump, by 1,000%. And I guarantee that.
Okay, so what about lighting? I wanted to ask this because I use lighting and my lighting gets hot. So I've got these lights on me and the lights are literally 5 feet away from me, but they're still throwing off heat. And there's got to be a lighting system that I could buy that doesn't make me want to sweat while I'm sitting here.
Yeah, that's important. I mean, even late May in Brooklyn, and I'm probably going to have to burn this shirt after this call. But I'm using a light as well. I think it's a little hot on my forehead, exposure-wise rather than temperature-wise. But my one recommendation is, in terms of convenience and heat generation, is to stick with an LED light.
Lee's virtual meeting with her client began at 9 a.m. sharp. The meeting seemed to be going well, and then as the meeting was about to close, the project manager told Lee, "You've got a pretty professional setup there, Lee. It looks and sounds great. What's the name of the company that set everything up for you? I've got a friend who might want to hire them." Lee never told me how she responded to the client's question, but she did tell me something important. She told me that more than any time in her life, even more than when she trained for the U.S. Junior Nationals and for the Junior Olympics, she genuinely understood the value of hard work and the willingness to never give up. And she told me that she learned something about herself for the first time. She learned that while life is going to hit you with unexpected events from time to time, events that can even knock you down and put you on the mat, to truly win, you've got to get back up and take the problem on with everything in you. She said, "I've got a level of resilience in me that I never knew existed. I know that I'm going to fail sometimes, but I also know that I'm able to get back up and keep fighting, and that makes me a winner."
Now, some of the bigger, more expensive lights can generate heat, but generally the smaller battery-operated lights can give you all the light you need. You just need to get them closer to your face than you would a large softbox, for instance. But LEDs, especially the battery-operated ones, will not generate much heat. You can use them in a small room in the summer without sweating through your clothing. And diffusion is important. You want to make sure you have a soft. A lot of lights come with a diffuser sheet or a diffuser panel, like a hard plastic panel you snap over the light. Make sure you're using something like that. Otherwise, it gets very kind of hot and you get exposure, washes the color out, and yeah.
And what about backlighting? That's one of the biggest problems that I have when I interview people. They'll sit in front of an open window, like with no curtains on it, and all I see is a silhouette. And it's kind of like, I'm interviewing Mr. X or Mrs. X, that you don't want to show their face.
Yeah, so cameras expose themselves. Most of us are using some level of auto exposure on our cameras. And when you have a bright light source behind you, whether it's a natural or unnatural room lighting, the camera will expose for the average exposure of the entire frame. So what it does is it picks up, because the background is so bright, it basically blacks out anything that's not well lit. You can get around this by simply looking at yourself in your video app. If you cannot see your face clearly, then you need to adjust the exposure. And that's, if there's a bright light behind you, close the drapes, close the blinds, or move your camera and set up to a different place. Just make sure your face, your eyes are clearly visible in the video frame.
What about recording or editing software?
Yeah, again, here, dozens and dozens of options. When you're starting out, stick with something that's not going to cost you a ton of money. If you're on a Mac, Apple always has great free software. So start with iMovie. I think it's available free for every Mac owner. Start with iMovie. If you're on a Windows machine, the software I used to recommend is no longer available. It's been purchased by another company. But there are packages available, including Filmora by a company called Wondershare, which you can get for not too expensive. And you want to get something that's not going to overwhelm you. If you're going to do editing for the first time or the first few times, if you step up to something like DaVinci Resolve, I guarantee you will be overwhelmed, or even, Premiere Pro, for instance. I guarantee if it's your first time out, you will be overwhelmed and frustrated, and you'll end up, shelving the project. Start with something very simple. Start with something that's not going to cost you too much money, and just practice as much as you can.
One more last bullet question, and then I've got some more questions. Best places to upload and host your videos.
Best places. So the one we're all in love with is YouTube. If you want to host video super cheaply and super easily, start a YouTube channel of your own. I think everyone with a Google account has the ability to open up a YouTube channel. You can, at this point in time, as we're recording this, you are free to upload as much video to YouTube as you wish at any point in time. So, and they can be of any length at this stage. So that's number one in terms of ease of use and no cost. If you have an application or use case where you need a little more sophistication and don't want the YouTube logo on every video, I recommend something like Vimeo. Vimeo has a free plan, which gives you, the ability to upload. I think it's I forget the exact limits, but there's a limit on the amount of footage you can upload per week.
I feel like most of our clients and members, you're working from home now more than ever. You're conducting more meetings online, and you're doing sales presentations with prospects via webcam. When you're doing a virtual meeting with a prospect or a client through a conferencing platform like Skype, Zoom, or Slack, that virtual environment becomes part of your personal brand. If the virtual meetings that you host are plagued by technical issues, unprofessional audio, and distractions, your personal brand will feel rough and chaotic. On the other hand, if you run virtual meetings without any hiccups, your personal brand will feel polished and professional, and you'll have a much greater opportunity to transform that prospect into a paying client.
And it resets every week. And then Vimeo has 4 or 5 tiers of paid plans as well. So once you get to a stage of needing something more and the ability to get rid of the logos and do crazy color changes on the player, et cetera, they have plans for that. If you're really at the top tier, and a lot of serious business owners have a plan from a company called Wistia, which I have as well, and they're kind of the cream of the crop. Also the most expensive of the 3 we've discussed, but they're definitely the cream of the crop in terms of the abilities, the features they offer for the price.
Yeah, if you're doing a lot of selling of online stuff, Wistia, I think, is the way to go. I really love that platform.
Yeah, me
and
too.
I don't think it's that expensive, really. I mean, for what if you're monetizing content, then it's a kind of a no-brainer.
Yeah, that's key.
What about using video in your business, in your own business, surprised you the most?
So what surprised me the most was the fact that it didn't take me long to get good at it. And here's what I mean. Even though I've been using cameras and shooting video for years, for well over a decade now, and I know the technology inside and out and can turn almost anything I see into a good looking and good sounding image. Once I turned the camera on myself, boy, did things get awkward quickly. Not technically, but just in terms of, having to script things and sounding like I was reading and looking awkward and uncomfortable, all of which was accurate. It didn't take long. In my opinion, that's the one thing that stops a lot of people, or either prevents them from starting, or makes them stop after they've started because they throw up their hands and say, I'm just not good on video. No one is good on video when they start. Just practice. Plan to make 10 videos that no one else in the world sees. And I guarantee you the 11th one, you'll be, yeah, that's okay. I don't mind sharing this with people. It takes time. It takes a little practice, but you can definitely do it. I've done it and I was super awkward. So don't let that stop you.
What's one thing about podcasting that really kind of caught you off guard that you really didn't expect as it relates to the audio technology and the things that we've talked about, all that's involved with getting a good sounding audio output for your podcast?
That's a good question and a tough one at the same time. I want to say that up until the point I started podcasting, because let's face it, the audio recording skills span the gamut from, again, holding the microphone in front of a floor model stereo when I was 10 years old to where we are today with all the technology we have. So the mechanics of it haven't changed all that much. Microphone, diaphragm, sound, wave. What caught me off guard, and I think this is something that surprises a lot of people when they start podcasting. It's not so much with the difficulty with the technology, but when you get into editing your recorded conversations, you find that it takes a lot of time. It can take a lot of time. Now, there are people who simply take everything they record, jam it into an MP3 and upload it. If you're fine with that, by all means, have at it. I like my podcasts to be a little more polished, so I tend to listen to them and edit as I'm listening. So if you record an hour-long conversation, it takes you at least an hour to listen to it all. And as you're moving through it, I had this inclination to remove a lot of the filler words. If there are some long, dead silences are pretty easy to get rid of, but ums and ahs from myself and my co-hosts and guests, that is super, super time consuming. But I think there's a stat I remember reading, recently, that most podcasts die after the 8th episode. The vast majority of shows just close the doors after the 8th episode. And I think it has a lot to do with the fact that there's a lot more work involved to creating a final product than you anticipate when you sit in front of someone with a microphone. That's just the starting point. It's not the ending point at the end point.
Tell us in full, again, the names of your books. Where can we get your books? Some people say go to Amazon. Some people want people to come to their website. And then tell us a little bit about what's going on in your business. Some of the things you mentioned, you do podcast production work. Tell us a little bit about that, how we can find out more about you and what you do, like your website, URL, things like that.
Sure thing. So my podcast book is called Introduction to Podcast Technology. Discover the essential tools and techniques you need to record, produce, and launch your podcast. And it's available on Amazon in paperback, Kindle, and on audible.com in audiobook format as well, with my dulcet tones doing the reading. So you'll get to hear me once again if you go the audiobook direction. My video book is entitled The Entrepreneur's Video Tool Guide. Discover the fastest, cheapest, and easiest way to start creating pro-quality business videos using low-cost and no-cost tools and techniques. It too is available on Amazon in all the regular formats, as well as an Audible audiobook format as well.
What's your website URL?
Website URL is davidpower.com, and I've set up a link for listeners today to hit all of the various assets and resources we've discussed. It is davidpower.com/Ken. That's /KEN for our host, Ken Newhouse.
And it's lowercase Ken.
Lowercase Ken.
Oh, hey, listen, I appreciate you being on the show today. I learned a lot today. I know people who are listening, who are considering a podcast, or maybe they're already doing a podcast, which I encourage. It's phenomenal. Guys, I love podcasting. It's added another layer to my business that I did not expect. I won't say that everyone should do a podcast, but I would say for sure that it's been an awesome experience. It's definitely been profitable. As far as video goes, that's a no-brainer. I can't think of hardly any of the people that listen to this show that wouldn't benefit from utilizing and incorporating video into their business in multiple ways, including live streaming, video on demand. So Dave, on behalf of myself and the members of Get Clients Now Nation, I want to thank you for being on the show today.
Ken, it's been a great deal of fun. Thank you so much. And I hope to see you again soon.
Our objective with this podcast is to help you and your business stand out in the marketplace by crystallizing your messaging, marketing, and communications. On behalf of the whole Ken Newhouse team, thanks for listening.